10 nuclear-capable bombers, 6 F-15 fighter jets, a remote island, and 1 target. As tensions spiral in the Middle East, new satellite images from Diego Garcia Island show US forces increasing their air power at the Indian Ocean base that experts say could be a staging point for an attack on Iran. The US Air Force has deployed 6 F-15 fighter jets, adding to the growing military buildup at Diego Garcia, where 4 B-52 bombers and a contingent of 6 B-2 stealth bombers are already operating. In March, satellite imagery showed the deployment of C-17 cargo planes as well as KC-135 refueling tankers. The US Air Force also recently augmented its aerial refueling capabilities at Diego Garcia, deploying additional KC-135 Stratotankers to the strategic Indian Ocean base, according to satellite imagery shared by open-source intelligence analyst M.T. Anderson. The deployment is crucial because B-2s are capable of carrying 30,000-pound GBU-57 or the massive ordnance penetrators better known as bunker buster bombs that would be needed to penetrate Iran's nuclear sites deep underground. The remote airbase, over 3,200 kilometers away from Iran, hosts Space Force operations and is a key port for US Navy vessels, including nuclear submarines. It also shelters a Sea Lift Command pre-positioning ship squadron. The strategically located island is just far enough to give the US Navy time and space to defend its strategic bombers from Iranian missiles and drones, yet close enough for the B-2s and the B-52s to strike targets deep within Iran. Over the years, Diego Garcia has become critical to US power projection in the wider Middle East and Indo-Pacific as the go-to base at short notice. During the late 1990s, the US wanted to conduct sporadic bombing runs against Iraq, then under Saddam Hussein. Saudi Arabia, which lies across the Persian Gulf, was reluctant to allow the US to launch warplanes from its airfields. So US military strategists drafted plans to fly B-52 bombers from Diego Garcia instead. American bombers flew directly from Diego Garcia to hit targets in Iraq and Afghanistan. The Gulf states until recently imposed strict limitations on the US using their air bases to strike the Houthis in Yemen. While that has been lifted, allowing American bombers to fly from Gulf states against Iran would be far riskier for the region's rulers. The significant US military buildup on Diego Garcia Island comes as Washington and Tehran both engage in a show of force amid hopes of a new nuclear deal. Although talks continue, US President Donald Trump has threatened military action if diplomacy fails to produce a new agreement on curbs that would prevent Tehran from obtaining nuclear weapons.
We would like to see if we could solve the Iran problem in an intelligent way as opposed to a brutal way. There's only two, intelligent and brutal. Those are the two alternatives.
The military presence can be seen as a calculated attempt to leverage power dynamics, extending the option of negotiations while maintaining a credible threat. However, the risk of an actual conflict remains high due to Iran's perception of an imminent threat and the broader geopolitical context. The presence of B-2 and B-52 bombers in Diego Garcia, previously used in major Middle East operations, suggests that military action is being seriously considered, even if it remains a last resort. Meanwhile, Iran, which is closely watching US activities on the remote island, has ramped up its military buildup. The Iranian leadership has even signaled a potential preemptive strike on Diego Garcia should US threats escalate further.
They can't have a nuclear weapon, and if they choose to go a different route, it's going to be a very sad thing, and it's something we don't want to have to do, but we have no choice. They're not going to have a nuclear weapon. They're not going to have a nuclear weapon. Do you understand that?
Tehran likely believes that Trump's threats lack credibility, given his historical pattern of aggressive rhetoric. However, Iran's fear that it cannot afford to ignore the possibility of a strike has prompted discussions within Tehran's high command about preemptive actions. Experts say if Iran believes an attack is imminent, it may strike first, leading to a rapid escalation.
آمریکایی‌ها بدانند که در مواجهه با ایران هرگز با تهدید به جایی نخواهند رسید.
در کمینگاهیم، منتظریم. اگر غلطی بکنند بیدرنگ پاسخهایی دریافت خواهند کرد که تمام گذشته خود را.
Both the US and Iran have carried out significant military maneuvers to demonstrate strength and send a clear warning to each other. The US, in coordination with Israel, has conducted large-scale exercises involving strategic bombers and fighter jets, including multiple B-52 flights near Iran as a direct show of force. Meanwhile, Iran also flexed its military muscle by conducting joint naval drills with Russia and China in the Persian Gulf, unveiling underground missile bases and testing long-range missiles. In 2024, during tensions with Israel, Iran threatened to target regional oil fields if US-aligned Gulf nations were to support an attack against it. Experts believe a similar scenario could unfold again, with the potential to not only push Gulf countries into a mediating role, but also disrupt oil supplies from the Gulf. Anticipating the high risk, Saudi Arabia and other Gulf states have imposed a ban on US warplanes using their airfields or skies to attack Iran. US policy in the Middle East appears increasingly aligned with Israeli interests, as Tel Aviv may view the current geopolitical landscape as the ideal moment to strike Iran. Israel's defense minister recently declared, "Iran is more exposed than ever to strikes on its nuclear facilities. We have the opportunity to achieve our most important goal, to thwart and eliminate the existential threat." Experts say Tel Aviv may be leveraging its influence to shift US policy in a more confrontational direction.
איראן נשארה איום רציני מאוד על ישראל. אנחנו כמובן בתיאום מלא עם ארצות הברית, מדברים איתם כל הזמן, ואנחנו מקווים, הם יכולים להשיג הסכם שימנע מאיראן נשק גרעיני. זה אומר שהוא ימנע מאיראן את היכולת להעשיר אורניום. אם זה יושג,
The Pentagon's Defense Intelligence Agency recently warned that Tehran can produce sufficient weapons-grade uranium for a nuclear device in probably less than 1 week. For Israel, which sees Iran as a threat to the Jewish state, this shrinking timeline only makes the country more desperate to decimate Iran's nuclear facilities before it achieves a nuclear weapon. During his first term, Trump ripped up a 2015 deal that capped Iran's nuclear enrichment at 3.67%. And in recent years, Tehran has begun to produce material to near weapons-grade levels. A recent report said that Israel will strike Iran's nuclear facilities within days. US intelligence intercepted Israeli communications, signaling potential attack plans and observed tangible military movements. Forward deployment of specialized munitions, completion of major Air Force exercises, and strike readiness indicators. However, US officials are now worried that Israel could decide to carry out strikes on Iran's nuclear program without much warning, the New York Times reported on May 28th. The report said that US intelligence believes Israel could make the preparations to carry out an attack in as little as 7 hours, which would leave the Americans little time to attempt to pressure Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to change his mind. The New York Times had earlier reported that Israel had planned to strike Iranian nuclear sites in May, but was waved off by Trump, who wanted to keep negotiating with Tehran. Netanyahu, however, has continued to press for military action without US assistance. Recent intelligence assessments warning of likely Israeli strikes against Iran's nuclear program reportedly named Fordow and Natanz, which host enrichment and centrifuge production facilities, as likely targets. Tension has gripped the region amid reports that Israeli officials have told Washington that a strike could be carried out even if a nuclear agreement is reached between US and Iran. The New York Times cited officials saying that Israel is concerned that Trump is so eager to reach a deal with Iran that he would allow Tehran to keep its nuclear enrichment facilities.
طور که خودشون گفتن در مصاحبات و گفته‌هاشون اصولاً به غنیسازی در ایران اعتقادی ندارن و معتقدن که غنیسازی باید به طور کامل متوقف بشه. این کاملا اگر این هدفشون هست توافقی در کار نخواهد بود. من این رو به صراحت عرض میکنم. اگر بخواهند که حق مردم ایران برای استفاده صلح‌آمیز از انرژی هسته‌ای رو از ما بگیرن، ما به هیچ وجه توافقی نخواهیم.
The report claims that Israel is particularly concerned about the possibility of any interim deal that would allow Iran to maintain its nuclear facilities for months or even years while a final agreement was reached. According to the New York Times report, US intelligence officials reportedly doubt the efficacy of a unilateral strike by Israel. And Israeli officials are said to believe that the US would have no choice other than to assist if Tehran were to strike back. While a full-blown war between the US, Israel and Iran seems to be looming, some experts have said that an Israeli air attack on Iran's nuclear program could be difficult to carry out successfully. Iran's atomic sites are numerous and dispersed across the country, and the most important assets have been moved underground in recent years in an effort to put them out of harm's way. A number of key potential targets, including the fuel enrichment plant at Natanz and the Fordow fuel enrichment plant, are located underground. A new facility, currently being constructed inside a mountain south of the main Natanz complex, is expected to house a centrifuge production facility, although some have suggested that it could also be used for uranium enrichment. However, this hasn't stopped smaller-scale sabotage operations that have been attributed to Israel. Israel is widely thought to have been behind the assassination in Tehran of 5 Iranian nuclear scientists since 2010. And in 2021, Iran blamed Israel for an explosion at a key enrichment facility. Israel claims it destroyed most of Iran's air defense and much of its missile-making capacity in the October 2024 exchange between the two countries. And if Iran's capabilities have been neutralized, Israel may face far less resistance if it decides to attack the country. However, intelligence officials have warned that a strike on Iran's nuclear facilities may only delay, not destroy the country's ability to piece together the technologies needed to manufacture an atomic weapon. Moreover, any attack would be complicated by Israel's most advanced fighter jets, requiring aerial refueling to strike Iran and return home safely. A senior military official responsible for protecting Iran's nuclear program said in April 2024 that the country would retaliate in kind if Israel targeted its assets. He hinted that even the threat of doing so could push Iran to reconsider its nuclear policies and seek a weapons of mass destruction.
ایران میگه من قابلیت دارم ولی فتوای رهبری این است که ما به سمت سلاح نمیریم. اما اگه شما در مسئله هسته‌ای ایران کار اشتباهی بکنید، ایران رو مجبور میکنید برن به سمت این امر، چون باید از خودش دفاع کنه.
The US and Israel have sworn not to let Iran acquire a nuclear weapon, but it remains to be seen whether the US will achieve that goal through diplomacy or strikes. Can Trump convince Iran to give up its nuclear enrichment, which Tehran has called a red line? Or will a desperate Israel attack Iran's deeply embedded nuclear sites, forcing the US to aid the strikes and throw the region into unprecedented chaos?